Welcome to Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. I am your host, Laurie McGraw. I have spent the past 30 years in leadership, and over the years, I've come to learn one thing. Women need women, and not just any women, but inspiring women. Tune in every week to hear from women at the pinnacle of their careers and from others who are just starting out. Episodes can be found at inspiringwomen.show or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will be inspired. This is Inspiring Women, and I am Laurie McGraw. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Susan Bailey. She is an allergist and an immunologist from Fort Worth, Texas. But importantly, Dr. Bailey is the 175th president of the American Medical Association. As she finishes out her last year of leadership with the AMA, Dr. Bailey is going to reflect on what has been a lifelong passion in terms of organized medicine, contributing to the profession, and what it means to be a leader at the pinnacle of medicine in her role at the AMA. Dr. Bailey, thank you for being on Inspiring Women.
Thanks for inviting me, Laurie.
Well, great. Well, let's get started. So, Dr. Bailey, you have such a long career, but what are you doing right now as you close out what has been an exceptional time of leadership for the AMA?
Well, Laurie, to be honest, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. As I finish my leadership in organized medicine, because I've been involved for over 40 years. I'm still in private practice. I'm in the same practice I've been in since 1988, but I've reduced it down to 2 days a week seeing patients. And so right now I'm kind of at a crossroads. Is do I retire? Do I take up something new? Do I just continue in my practice? I thought it would be more obvious to me and more evident when I got to this point, but it's not quite there yet. But it's a new adventure for me.
Well, I find it so interesting. So for, women at the height of their leadership can still be reflecting on what's next. And it always seems like there is something next, but maybe just a little bit of background. I mean, so many people know your story. You've been such an advocate for organized medicine. And obviously that has been so important to you in terms of what you've done over your career. Give us a little bit of the history reel. How did you get into organized medicine specifically after becoming a physician?
Well, even further than that, I've always been a joiner. I have always obviously been an extrovert. I get energy from being around other people. And maybe it was being from a small family with just one sister. I don't know, but I have always flocked to groups. I joined clubs. I loved leadership positions. When I got to college at Texas A&M University, I was active in student government and other types of organizations. And when I got to medical school, I heard a presentation from the chair of the medical student section of the Texas Medical Association. And I thought, wow, these people are so involved. They're making a difference. This is where I want to be. And from day one, I have firmly believed that taking care of your patients means more than what happens in that immediate patient-physician relationship. It happens in state houses of, state legislatures. It happens in Washington, D.C. It happens in insurance company boardrooms. It happens in city council meetings. And being involved in advocacy, I have always felt has been a professional obligation. It fills out the total picture of really taking care of your patients. And so I felt that the AMA has always been the organization for me that makes the biggest difference in the lives of physicians and the lives of our patients.
Well, I'd love to hear, over the many years of service, as a physician caring for patients, but as an advocate for physicians in the profession of medicine and for patients, as you reflect back, what are some of the proudest moments of things that were done with your participation in leadership?
I was very proud. I was at a brand new medical school. I was in the charter class of the Texas A&M College of Medicine, and to have been in a brand new medical school and then become chair of the Texas Medical Association student section, the AMA student section, and becoming a leader very early on in my career from a brand new medical school. I was incredible. I was proud of A&M, but I also took some personal pride in being able to do those things. But really, I think one of the things, it was not fun at all, but I think I'm most proud of is being able to have a successful practice, be active in organized medicine, and be a single mom. I raised two sons. Well, you never do it on your own. It definitely takes a village, but being able to do all that, you can't do it all at the same time, but you can do it all. And I'm proud now to have two adult sons who were successful, kind, generous men, and that somehow I only dropped a few plates when they were spinning on those poles, like in the Ed Sullivan Show.
Well, how did you do it all? I mean, during those times, as a woman leader in medicine, yeah, as a single mom, of practice, still, participating in the role of advocacy and participating in organized medicine. How did you balance? What was your secret? I think that, today we're hearing so many stories of burnout of physicians, and just, coming out of the pandemic, the further crises of mental health and other things. Back then, what was the secret that you either learned or had or got your energy from someone else? Give us some of those secrets.
I think the most important factor is that I had flexibility built into my practice setting. Number one, the choice of a specialty in allergy and immunology leaves yourself some flexibility. I didn't have to be in the OR at 6 o'clock every morning. I didn't have to, be on call, 24 hours a day. I was in a practice where it was an expense sharing practice as opposed to an income sharing practice. And so my partners were much less concerned about what I did as long as I paid my fair share of the bills and took my fair share of the call, which as an allergist, to be honest, is not real cumbersome. So I was able to be in control of my schedule, and having a whole, all working parents have discovered that you've got to for your kids, you've got to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. And for me, my plan A was having a full-time housekeeper or live-in nanny sometimes. Plan B was that my parents lived in town, so they were able to help out, although I tried not to burden them too much with that. Plan C is that I had enough personnel in my office that if I really could not get away, I could send one of them to go pick up one of the kids at school or something like that. And then plan D was to just bring the kids to work with me. So they kind of, became a part of the practice family. And we created a patchwork of backup plans that seemed to work pretty well. And when I went to meetings, I would very often bring the boys with me. I would have one of my medical assistants. I would pay her way. We would share a room. We'd have a connecting hotel room with the boys. And and she would get to go see whatever cool place we were in, and maybe get some continuing education herself, depending on the meeting. And I would have the freedom to go to my meeting to fulfill my obligations without, being worried about how the kids were doing.
Well, Dr. Bailey, I have not heard that story from you before, and that I have to say is so impressive. I mean, we hear so much about mothers trying to balance the, competing priorities of family obligations, whether they have help or not, and, the work balance as they try to aspire in their own career journeys. That you brought that all together without division is just incredible to hear. very, very inspiring. I want to talk about your pinnacle year at the AMA as president during the time of the pandemic. And yeah, I have heard you talk about being the right woman at the right time for this job, where, at the height of the pandemic, this was also the height of misinformation, a lot of confusion, and also not the same type of presidency that most of the 175 presidents before you have had, being out on the road. You were bound to the home. So just tell us what that looked like, what again you are most proud of during that incredible year, where the voice of science, the voice of trust was your voice.
Oh boy. I've thought about writing a book, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready to relive the whole thing. The job of the AMA president is to be the spokesperson for the organization, to go out and talk to physicians, patient groups, legislators, regulators, the business community, about the mission of the AMA to promote the art and science of medicine and the betterment of public health, to advocate for specific AMA policies that have been passed by our very democratic House of Delegates composed of physicians from all over the country in every specialty. And I've had AMA presidents before me tell me they were on the road 300 days of their year, and all over the world, representing the AMA at the World Medical Association and other national medical associations, as well as trying to visit as many small county medical societies across the country as they could. And I took office in June of 2020. I didn't have the big fancy black tie gala installation that other presidents have had, because it was at the very beginning of the pandemic when we were still trying to figure out Zoom calls. My inauguration was on videotape, and I watched myself get inaugurated on my laptop on my kitchen table, and did not take a single flight, did not travel anywhere while I was AMA president. So as a result, the AMA and I and leaders across the country learned how to communicate our message virtually, whether it was, in writing, but, very quickly, we all discovered the power of podcasts like this, of live webinars, of recorded speeches that, were then sent out and played over and over again. And we were able to pivot very quickly because we had to. Necessity is the mother of invention. And you notice that phrase, isn't necessity is the father of invention? I love that. And be able to have a much greater, broader reach because we weren't bound by the restrictions of being live and in person. So it makes you realize what a time suck travel really is. But so instead of being lucky to get 2 events in a day, it was not unusual for me to be able to do it 4 events in a day and still see patients on telemedicine for a few hours a day, and like to do something early in the morning. Maybe I see some patients in the morning through telemedicine. I actually ended up seeing more patients during my presidency than I thought I would because of telemedicine. So that was a real godsend. Maybe a lunchtime lecture to somebody, maybe some media interviews in the afternoon, and then a talk to a group of physicians in the evening. That it was exhausting, but it was very doable.
Well, resiliency and being open to significant change, but still the responsibility of leadership. And again, that voice of trust, that voice of science, that voice of leadership in terms of sorting through what were incredibly complicated times during the pandemic. Maybe just to, it's interesting to hear you, Dr. Bailey, talk about sort of, your career and what you've done. And what I don't hear you saying is talking about the breaking of boundaries. I mean, as an AMA president. You're 175 years of this association. You're female president number 6, I believe. So, that certainly is, groundbreaking in and of itself. I would just like to turn to some reflections. Women in medicine, we are seeing more the female graduates coming out of medical school. We're crossing the 50% barrier. We're seeing changes in medicine in terms of, the population of female women physicians, but we're also seeing sort of same old differences in compensation in terms of not being on par. I would just like to get your reflections in terms of how you think about the role of women in medicine, how that has perhaps evolved from when you started out.
Like I mentioned, or may not have mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, when I started out 40 years ago, I was one of 7 women in my class of 32 students. And that was pretty groundbreaking in and of itself to have that many women. I was the first woman admitted to the A&M College of Medicine, but all that means is that in the first little pod of 5 students that were accepted to this brand new medical school, I was the only woman. And then, of course, my classmates came along later. But I've always felt that the growth of women in medicine and as a result in leadership, I had very few mentors in medical school and in residency, women mentors. There just weren't that many of them. And so my mentors were always the women that were just one step ahead of me. If I was a 3rd-year student, my mentor was a 1st-year resident. If I was a 1st-year resident, my mentor was a 2nd-year resident who was, had just been in the steps that I had was now walking through. And so I always thought that this would kind of happen on its own. And but here we are 40 years later, even though women comprise over 1/3 of all of the physicians in practice, we're between around 12% of medical school deans and department chairs are women. We're pretty good in terms of the lower faculty numbers being commensurate with our, percentages in the general population. But, they don't make the same. The pay parity is still a big issue in medicine. Women are really not taught to negotiate. I think a general personality characteristic is to be a consensus builder and to get along and to be nice and not rock the boat and just be glad that you're there. And I think it is, I once thought you don't make a big deal about being a woman in medicine, you get along, you assimilate. And now I feel that we need to be incredibly intentional and outspoken about the need for more women leaders, the need for pay parity, and the need to make lifestyle changes for all physicians so that they feel comfortable having the complete life that they want to have, whether that includes family or children or taking care of elderly parents or playing the piano at night, whatever, without getting totally burned out in the process.
Well, I could not agree with you more. And I have to say that it is so encouraging to hear that that energy and passion, particularly, reflecting on what has been an outstanding career of service in medicine. And as you would think about your own, Dr. Bailey, inflection point right now, it's very clear to me that you're not done. It's not over, whether it's a book or government service or something else. I am excited to see what's next. As we close out on this Inspiring Women conversation, any last words of wisdom and advice for other younger women who are starting out today?
Well, first of all, I would speak to the women that have been around to give a hand out to the younger women. I encourage younger women to get involved. It is possible to, be involved in medical organizations. Organizations need women's leadership. They need our participation. They need to understand the whole picture of what it's like to be a physician in America in 2022. And that invariably involves juggling family obligations, taking care of elderly parents, and then other specific issues that women care about, women's health and the like. And don't be afraid to get involved. Don't be afraid to volunteer for the job no one else wants to do. Don't be afraid to get up and give a speech. Yes, it'll be scary as all get out the first time, but every time you do it, it gets a little bit easier. And because it's gratifying, personally, I think involvement in professional organizations is one of the antidotes to burnout, because it gives you a greater sense of purpose and feeling like you're actually getting something done with like-minded colleagues.
Well, Dr. Bailey, you've always been such a strong advocate for involvement and not just, leadership by example, but also, really suggesting that for others. I really appreciate those closing words. We have been on this Inspiring Women episode speaking with Dr. Sue Bailey. And Sue, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laurie.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced by Kate Cruz at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Laurie McGraw, and thank you for listening.